Welcome to our session regarding walking the IT resource tightrope. I have a great session for you today with some great panelists. Wanted to introduce our speakers and myself as well. My name is David Scafito. I'm with CLA. I have about 15 years of federal government, state and local, and private sector experience doing IT security assessments and audits. And with me today is Jacqueline Johnson, the Federal Trade Commission Deputy CISO, who has about 20 years of experience running teams in operations and security. As well, I have Susan Schultz-Searcy from the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation here with me in person. She's the Assessment and Authorization Division Manager of the Enterprise Security Department. She manages A&A process as well as the risk management process, and also in cloud integration. And also with us today is Corey Pickerel, also from Federal Trade Commission. He's a human resource specialist with the Office of Executive Director, Human Capital Management Office, Human Capital Operations Team, where he focuses on staffing, recruitment, and classification. So I just wanted to jump in a couple topic areas that we have today, and we can highlight some of our good conversations that we're going to have. Now, the first topic area we have is, what is the impact of external influences on IT resource management? And our first question that I'm going to pose to Jacqueline is, how has your agency adapted to external influences regarding IT resource management and the increasingly remote workforce?
So sure, with the increased workload of new security requirements, we leaned in and augmented our workforce rather early on and began working on succession planning. This included cross-training our employees to develop their skill sets and to lighten the load on the existing staff, specifically those that were working on incident response and vulnerability management. So we utilized a couple of flexibilities, including direct hiring, OPM's Cyber Corp Scholarship for Service to recruit talent for internships, and details. Some of these were internal as well as some from other agencies. So of course, with all of this, we coordinated all of this with our HR office, but since this has been underway since early 2020, I would characterize this as more of a partnership, as our HR staff have provided valuable insight and suggestions to gauge which hiring flexibility would best meet our needs. So, Corey, I will turn things over to you if you want to add more detail on that.
So basically, the key word there in hiring flexibilities is flexibility. And so that continues to be a focus in human capital. And so, as Jackie said, direct hire lends itself to the discipline of information security and cyber-related positions. And those are the key positions that we are faced with in federal service at this point. Then we turn to, of course, scholarships for service, known as Cyber Corps internships, and the utilization of pathways beyond summer interns, getting recent graduates and interns maybe throughout the year. What happened with COVID-19 is that we had to quickly get our staff acclimated to telework and the maximum flexibility possible, number one, for safety, but then you also had to reimagine the work that was solely done on site. And so figuring out those telework flexibilities to keep staff not only into what they're doing on a day-to-day basis as their routine work, but also keep them engaged while they're away from the building. So.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that. Sue, did you have any follow-up?
Yeah, sure. Our agency, we have been blessed with incredible skill set within our organization, which is terrific when it comes to cyber and IT security. However, the mounting needs, priorities, and changing priorities coming from the federal government right now has stretched those skill sets rather thin. We have binding operational directives, executive orders. We were just talking earlier about the FISMA core metrics have been a little delayed and are coming out. So we are also looking at leaning on technology, leaning on automation and cloud to help our folks free them up so that they can go forth and execute those priorities to give them a little bit more time to help them not be as overwhelmed and stretched as thin. So I know we were hearing a lot this morning about automation and cloud, and our department's really starting to move in some of those areas in different ways, right? Not just the traditional ways we think of automation, but other ways as well, so that we can take that skill set and apply it to these new priorities.
Thank you for that. I had a follow-up question to Jacqueline. Can you give an example for how your workforce management, your IT workforce management, has changed regarding additional cost?
Sure. As I mentioned, we sort of focus on staffing, and one of the things that everyone sort of looks forward to in terms of recruitment and staffing is getting people onboarded, right, and provisioning them with system access so they can actually be part of the team. So to support that ongoing need, we increased our asset management and equipment provisioning costs because we found ourselves in a situation with, can you believe it, limited access to the building and badging services. So we augmented our, specifically our multi-factor authentication capabilities. What we were using solely before was access to PIV cards, right, and CAT cards. So you needed to actually get into the building to actually have those credentials issued. So we looked at options for augmenting our multi-factor authentication and quickly facilitate onboarding by shipping equipment to employees and contractors, which was totally not in our plan, on our budget, or in anyone's sights before 2020.
Thank you for that, Jackie. Sorry, forgot that we still have a slide deck. The next topic area I wanted to count on was to ask about was how the impact of mounting security risks and changing operational needs have impacted our agencies. Wanted to start with Sue and ask you this question: is how has the advent of new security control requirements such as the automation, cloud, and zero trust, and supply chain concerns, the binding operational directives that have been recently issued, CISA's KEV, just what have you done and how has that impacted your IT resource management approach?
Yeah, and so it's impacted us positively and negatively. Positively, in our organization, our management, our director, they need near real-time awareness. There's no more I can sit around and wait for the data, the information I need to make good decisions. They need that data faster, more frequently. As that data changes, they need to understand that. As the risk changes, they need to be able to understand that to make those decisions. Automation has helped us from that regard, giving them near real-time awareness across many different fronts. We're using it in enterprise risk management. We're using it in finance. We're using it in security control assessments. There's that value. The additional value is it takes pressure off our workforce. So I have an assessor that can only do a certain number of controls. They can only test a certain number of controls. Auditors too. You can only test a certain amount and deliver that on time to your client. What if I could free that time up to add additional controls without the additional cost? That's what automation is allowing us to do, that efficiency. We are able to say, hey, what if 20% of these controls could be automated? Could you do additional controls? It's not I can reduce the workforce. It can be I can use that workforce and direct them differently with that key to automation, or also cloud. That can also help free us up. The downside of that is we have to be able to have skill sets, folks, in a workforce that can understand the technology, implement it, and be looking for new ways to utilize that as well. We put out a survey to our stakeholders. We were quite curious about our ANA services and in what ways we could help improve. We learned quite a lot from our stakeholders about where we might be able to add automation to that. They were kind of thinking about this ahead of time and let us know here are some of the ways in our department starting to look at those and do some market research as to how we can get that implemented.
That's some great information, thank you. Jacqueline, do you have any follow-up for that on how some of these changes have affected your stance on and your agency's stance on IT resource management?
So sure, I would say similar to Sue, these changes have actually for us been a benefit as well. I would say zero trust and supply chain concerns have been all sort of heavy bricks that we have been attempting to overcome. They've been objectives for us in terms of implementation for the last 3-4 years in our IRM strategic plan. And with the advent of, surprisingly, the EO and the BOD requirements, though they are a heavy lift, it really allowed us to have conversations with our business stakeholders and even agency leadership to get support for some of these things where they were just buzzwords before for some folks. So I think it's been double-edged sword. Yes, we do have more work to do, but it's really lended itself to better conversation and understanding some of these in real-world ways.
I like the buzzword. We just had a quick conversation before about cloud, but we were referring to the sky. So it's fun how those things have become more pervasive over the last couple of years. I had a follow-up for Corey, specifically regarding changes to agency leadership and how have you adapted IT resource management under those?
Along with adapting to COVID-19, the agency and most agencies had to adapt to an administration change. And with a new administration, of course, comes new initiatives, comes new priorities. Our senior leadership quickly assessed that there were gaps in data management and some of the data analysis needed to further the agency's goals. Part of the agency's goals, of course, is for our agency is to protect consumers. And so we had to quickly go out and bring on staff, even without bringing them on as full FTEs, but full-time employees, but bringing them on as in the expert capacity, consulting capacity, interagency agreement, so on and so forth. And so also with the new administration, they signed an executive order to increase and foster diversity. So with that, we continued to ensure that the diversity initiatives were met, but we had to also ensure that this was a part of the strategy for all hiring managers, even if they weren't adapting to those changes before. So.
Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that. Sue, did you have any additional feedback?
I think that for myself as a hiring manager, having to look at the changing priorities that came out, we didn't really have change of leadership so much, but ours was more as these binding operational directives and EOs and core metrics come out. Our leadership has to kind of change midstream, right? And they have to adapt. And they're saying, well, now this is now a priority. Remember when I said it wasn't going to be? Well, this is now a priority. And you have to somehow find that workforce to be able to support those new priorities, even though you know they're going to change again in another month. And what that allowed me to do as a hiring manager is that process of hiring outside was taking a good bit of time, given the external forces in the pandemic. And that oftentimes was a limit to me to look outside for what I needed and having the options of looking internally. What skill sets do we already have right here in our own organization that we could use as a detail, right? So I can get a detail to come and help stand up a project on that priority that we can then maintain, and then that detail can return to where they came from, or they can stay with us and help to guide us through that. Same thing with our internship program. I think that was also mentioned earlier. We have some really good folks that are coming in the door that are very strong communications and data visualization. They can help us look at how we can be reporting, measuring, and tracking any of the changes in priorities. And for those folks, I was able to bring those in quicker and adjust to those changes in priorities a little bit better. So I know for our division, we have several folks on detail to us right now that I'm very grateful for because they have that skill set that we needed at the time we needed it, and we can start working on these initiatives right away.
Thank you for that feedback. And I know one of the earlier conversations we had as well was covering on it's a constantly changing environment. And I knew if you didn't mention it, I was going to say something. But that's the one thing that in IT, it's always a constantly changing environment. I think we all agree on that one. All right. Now this is the one topic of the hour that I think we're all kind of focusing in on. It seems to be more relevant for more people and more capacities because we are so reliant on technology. If we didn't have the technology we had 2 years ago, or the rapid succession of Zoom and Teams and those things coming out to allow us to work remotely, we really would not have succeeded as agencies or as auditors or accountants because we're so reliant on technology. So I wanted to just start off with this conversation about, how are we going to find and retain, skilled IT professionals in this modern, high turnover workplace. We touched a little bit on topics earlier of different places that we're looking, internships, cybercore, things like that. I wanted to start with Jacqueline. If you can kind of describe what are you doing to find and retain IT skilled professionals?
So sure, I would, to your point, I think for us, we just really needed to be creative and think outside the box in terms of who we hire, how we go through hiring, and then making sure we're taking care of our employees. So for us, we hired recent graduates and out of a program that the agency sponsors. It's our paralegal program. And these were folks that either had interest in cybersecurity or technology in general. And believe it or not, they flourished. They helped sort of change the culture of our organization, which was very focused, I guess, primarily with folks that did engineering or had computer science backgrounds, right? And they've just brought a whole fresh view in terms of our program management culture as well. In terms of retaining, we invested in sort of planning our all hands meetings, which I could say were a bit dry. So we sort of moved to our meetings to be less formal and focused on hosting ice-breaking activities which fostered team building. Then finally we started, like I would say they're called stay interviews. I call them stay interviews, which are sort of like staff check-ins to check in with folks that not about the work as much as seeing how they're doing and how can we make work life balance with life, regular life, right? The baggage you have sort of behind the scenes that sort of makes work a little bit harder if you can't balance it. So those are just a couple of things that we started doing that seems to have been paying off dividends.
Thank you for that, Jackie. Appreciate it. Sue, I wanted to ask you kind of the follow-up with that is, how are you finding and retaining skilled IT professionals in your agency?
I think I agree with a lot of what was just said. Some of the other things that I'm doing now as a manager is looking at what is the skills that I need in order to fulfill that role, right? It may not take somebody with 9 certifications to fulfill that role. So I have to kind of stop and think, what are those skill sets, and then look differently to see who might have those skill sets. If I'm looking for great communicators or project managers, someone who can write well and do policy work for us or do assessment work for us, then I'm looking for different skill sets. And I think that oftentimes means that I can look within the organization at areas that I might not have tapped before and work with other managers and colleagues to say we have an opportunity for someone to get some experience within IT. I don't think there's any of us that say I would love to sit at my desk and do the same job for the next 30 years and enjoy that happily. We want change. We want to be able to explore new areas. That's really worked out for cybersecurity at our agency. We have some folks that would not have ordinarily come through that pipeline, but because we were looking at them a little bit differently, like Jacqueline said, have kind of helped change the culture. The other thing that I like to do as a manager with our existing employees is ask the question, what is the one thing that you have not gotten to do that you very much would like to do? What area would you like to work in when we're developing their performance plan? It's one thing for me to say, here are my priorities, therefore they're your priorities. but I also want to make sure that those employees have an opportunity to try or to excel at something that maybe they've had an idea about for the last 5 years and they want to try that out. That's where our colleagues come in handy and say, hey, I may have someone that wants to detail to the network team, or I have someone that wants to detail to the assessment team, and we're able to kind of make those things happen. So just asking your employees, are there areas that they haven't gotten to work in that they want to learn more about and get more experience in, and able to support them, whether that's certifications or detail or working that into their performance plans. I think that has helped them understand that we really value them, and not just what you can do for me today, but what you can do for me over the next few years and where you want to be in your career.
Just as a follow-up to that, I wanted to ask you, is there a tip or a trait that you can say when you're talking and engaging with your staff on how you can start that communication?
So for me, in the remote learning environment with a lot of competing priorities, it's number one, making the time to have that conversation. And I know I've tended to have these one-on-one meetings, and there are a lot of staff members, and so it makes it difficult to kind of squeeze everybody in. But for the first 3 weeks of the month, we have one-on-ones, and then the last week we do a team building effort. And during the team building efforts, we're able to kind of target different questions that are a little bit not as intense as our normal meetings, so that I can get a picture of who this person is in a team setting. And then I can follow that up in a one-on-one to say, hey, you were talking a lot about your interest in automation or robotics and things like that. I think we may have an area that you could help us in, and then listen to them get really excited about that opportunity, and then help them find that. But it's taking that time to hear those employees and what it is that they have a need with. I know that's very hard in a remote setting where you are having more and more demands put on your time. And the idea is that you're working remotely so you can work more hours in the day somehow, is also, I was one of these people that had a 4-hour commute. So getting those 4 hours back, I think sometimes the federal government thinks we have you for another 4 hours. It's often a little bit demanding, but making that time to really understand them and have that conversation with them. I know the speaker this morning had a lot of great questions that she came up with the managing up, and I thought I don't ask those questions enough. I don't think I've ever asked my staff, what are your pet peeves? So maybe I need to start asking those questions more too, and that will help shed some light.
I took the exact same note, actually. So, and Corey, I had a follow-up question for you just about the hiring practice and how you develop a pipeline and retainment.
Basically, in my experience, it has been helpful to understand the psychology behind why a person applies for a federal position. Basically, putting up a job on USA Jobs just isn't the most effective way, sort of, to attract talent. And so in human capital, we encourage our managers to become strategic partners with us during the hiring process, because not only will the job announcement attract a certain caliber of candidate, but doing the outreach outside of the vacancy can lend itself to multiple pipelines of people coming into maybe a job they didn't think they would apply for this agency. I know creating a pipeline early at the college levels, when you basically get them engaged into federal service early, that can create an attraction for an individual to want to be a quote unquote work for public service. I know, for instance, here we are in the Washington, D.C. area, and Amazon is on the way. And so as an IT professional, there's no way you could probably compete with the salary of Amazon. But what you can compete with is having a person connect to the agency and connect to the agency's mission and goals. And so those are the people that you want to retain in the long run, that are going to be the best for your agency, so you can get a return on investment. I know that here at this particular agency, they went back and standardized a lot of their positions So for instance, when you have a more standardized position, there could be someone who has a sharper skill set, let's say in project management. However, I may do project management only as maybe 10% of my job, but having some cross training between those individuals in the office, your skill set can then match mine at some point because my knowledge is shared with you. And that's the type of environment you want to be in. And so I know that we went back and decided that those were some of the things we need to look at as we looked at succession planning throughout the agency. And so again, those are the crippling things that we have to deal with because, as you know, we are stewards of the taxpayers' money, and our salary will only be our salary, but we still have to try to engage the candidate so that they can feel like they're a part of the mission as well.
Thank you, Corey. Now, you said three things there that I really enjoyed, and the first is definitely the return on investment, because I'm sure everyone in the room and in the audience definitely wants to see that coming back for any resource that they're looking to. And the stewards of the taxpayer dollar, I mean, we're all guardians of that at a certain degree. And I lost the third one, but no.
Well, I have one more to add to that.
Well, go for it.
You basically are in a workforce now that may still, knock on wood, still have traditionalists that are still in the workforce. You have baby boomers, you have millennials, Generation X. And so that is cross generations that you have to merge into getting the agency's mission accomplished. So for instance, there was something that was created in our agency known as a knowledge transfer. And basically there were, there were basically individuals who were more techie. They were up on social media. They had the latest iPhone. And so there, of course, there were some baby boomers on board that wanted nothing to do with that technology. And so they would set up little 15-minute sessions to sort of improve the knowledge of the technology so that you're learning something. I'm cross-generation. This is what's going on here with this iPhone. Oh, I'm not afraid of this now. I was afraid of this before. And so it's been, I think, more of a collaborative effort trying to bridge those generations together.
Thank you, Corey. I think we can all relate to the little bit of a generational gap, even with our current experience. We're all kind of there right now in terms of learning new things because the technology is always changing. Sue, Jacqueline, I didn't know if you either had a comment about that or wanted to follow up.
I don't.
Though I work in technology, I must say that it is moving so quickly that I might participate in the effort that I working at the Federal Trade Commission. I'll probably participate in the engagement that Corey mentioned, just so I can stay abreast of every new social media widget gadget underway.
For instance, like those individuals who are at the college level are entering the workforce with maybe they have student loans. So utilizing the student loan repayment program is something that speaks to someone who's at that level coming into the workforce. However, when you have someone that has been working for a certain amount of time in private sector, and now they're at a different pace in their life. Maybe they're at a certain age, the kids are off to college and they want something a little different than what they were expecting in private sector. And so workforce, those work-life balances and work-life programs that we offer. And the biggest thing about COVID-19 is that telework has become no longer something that we are fearful of. It is kind of an everyday practice. And so utilizing that to the fullest capacity, I will tell you that most recently on my desk, the number one reason for someone resigning in our position is because they wanted more flexibility with telework. So that tells you right there what kind of workforce we're moving into. It's a changing face because of what happened with the pandemic. And so we have to adapt to the change and be change agents.
Thank you, Corey. We got a couple questions coming in from the field. I just wanted to ask a couple of those while we're here. One of the top leading question right now is if the business unit has issues that they develop a need the tech office to focus on, are there any key words that you can use to kind of cut through red tape and make things happen faster? It's probably for Jacqueline or Sue, probably.
Keywords to drive their change?
To drive change. I think the individual that commented on this indicated that their tech office is overworked.
Oh, and I think that's everyone, right? But I think if you end up, if the business unit can communicate whatever their challenge is, based on what the specific technology is, right? So basic risk versus impact, right? If they could communicate that to their tech office, I think, at least for us in our office, that normally changes instead of, I'd like X, right? If you can talk about how that change actually impacts your mission or the business, I think that it at least opens ears and gets you to a more productive conversation.
Thank you for that.
So I like to practice going in with friends, because I think having one voice is one voice, and having a CISO say this is a way we need to help, but we don't have the resources. Our office formed early on partnerships with strategic people within the organization. I know a lot of people were not interested in forming partnerships between the cybersecurity and privacy office. I was very interested in doing that, because when you look at A130 and some of the other things, the SAOP has a little bit more say sometimes than a CISO does. And in terms of needing to get that support on board, having that senior agency official for privacy or your chief privacy officer talking about why this is an important investment for the business from either PII or critical data perspective. Also, we were able to work with our finance and partner with them to say, here's the value of this. So that when suddenly you aren't alone, but you have multiple people going with you saying this is a priority and talking to management, suddenly management's hearing it from the privacy office, from cybersecurity, from finance, like how many people are going to talk to me about this? Suddenly they're saying this really is a priority for us. So I would say to them, start going out and making some friendships within your organization and talking to them about this isn't just important to this business, this is important to the mission of the organization, and really lay that out and define that for them and talk to them in terms that they will understand. When I talk to the privacy office, when we talk about the critical data that we have, they can understand that. They want to work with us on that. So, make those partnerships so that you can work on behalf of your stakeholders and your business organization.
And just to follow up, it's almost like it sounds like if you can elicit the risk, the urgency, and make those friends in certain places that can kind of grease the wheels is really what really help you move forward with those types of requests. Does that sound right?
Yeah, and also sometimes the business tends to wait strategically before they bring in security, and sometimes we hear they don't really want to bring in the no police right away. But if you can bring security privacy folks in as early as possible so that they can help you and collaborate and work with you, that helps. I think sometimes we're notified down the line, and at that point, resources have already been allocated, things have already been done, and we're trying to fix things or repair things. And sometimes that damages the relationship between the business and the tech office. So do make sure you try and let them know as early as you can and say, we want to be partners in this with you. We want to help you get to that place. We want the business to gain efficiencies and use technology appropriately. We want to be creative. We want to be innovative. And I think there's a support there when we know about it ahead of time as opposed to on the back end. So yeah. I don't know if that answered the follow-up.
No, that answered my follow-up. I mean, I could talk about risk all day, but some of my closest friends are IT support, and that's how I actually accomplish anything in my job. So I had a couple other questions that came through. One of them, this is Jacqueline, I'm going to ask you this question first. Do your agencies utilize any remote accessing applications to help troubleshoot IT issues in a remote environment, and how is that effective or useful?
Yes, we do. I'm not familiar exactly with all the names of them, but yes, we've leveraged several remote applications as we've started working remotely, probably in March. That was our biggest concern. We were completely overwhelmed with help desk calls with folks that at the beginning of the pandemic, we allowed folks to take their laptops, their monitors, their keyboard monitor connection points home so that they could work. But then they got home and couldn't actually connect them. So we ended up implementing ways for our help desk to remotely manage their desktops. Granted, what we use are GFEs, right? The only thing that connects to our network is government furnished equipment, and so it has a certain build, certain image, and so that gives us the ability to be able to walk folks through how to fix the problem. And we're using VPN technology that allows folks to connect to our network.
Kind of follow up that with Sue. I know some of your experience in cloud integration probably had some impact there.
It does, and our organization was very forward-looking when we started to see some of the early signs of the pandemic. There was a movement to ensure we knew we were going to have more folks teleworking. We did not know, obviously, like no one else did, what the size or impact, but knew there was going to be some impact and began moving in that direction. So I think that was very early. There were some things we already had in the works that we needed to speed up, obviously, as many of your organizations did as well. And those have worked out really well. And in talking with our auditors, we often use those as some of our maturity to show that maturity. The other thing that I'm finding is some of our vendors have done a great job on that in helping us manage remotely. Other vendors have not done such a great job on that, and I'm sure you've seen that as well. And I think that will unfortunately play out for those vendors as well, that over the last 2 years that you needed to have gotten this right and it wasn't. So that's going to help CIOs make better decisions about what those tools are going to be in the future and how those things are going to be used. So we have seen that.
Sounds like embracing change and understanding, where the response is and where you're getting the best, return on. Go back to return on investment. It's not just our people; it's also our IT technology as well. So I had one more question that came from the audience, and I had my own follow-up question, unless anyone else has a question in the audience. Is information technology the new name for quality control? I mean, are you kind of the boundary for what provides quality to the environment now, since we're all working remotely? The IT is tasked with integrating the big picture, but they may not have time to look at the quality of the integration. So how is application management and implementation and working through those bugs, how's that picture look? And I'm probably going to ask Jacqueline first.
Sure. I think it's always been the case, though. Maybe it is much more visible now, but I think the success of any new technology is the rate at which your user community adopts it and uses it and makes it part of their business process. So I guess I would agree. If you say, I think our role has always sort of been quality assurance, right? If technology or process we have implemented doesn't necessarily return in investment, or if it's not reliable, then that's when you make the hard decision that perhaps this wasn't a success and we need to move on. So I think quality should just be, it has to be ingrained in the service that we provide as a part of the norm.
Thank you, Jackie. Sue, did you have any follow-up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's not just IT's. I know we hear this all the time. Security is not just IT's responsibility, but it is also starts with the business. And has there been an appropriate outline of the requirements and what's needed and how the workflow is the business is probably going to see what's working or not working from a quality perspective before we will. And then IT has to be that support and that validation of what's going on, what's going right or wrong. But I think it needs to come from different parts of the organization, because there are parts that I will never see that maybe get used by an accountant, an auditor, assessor that says, hey, this is the user saying that this isn't working the way we need it to. We need something different. And I know we've gone through a couple of those projects at our organization, and our shop is saying, well, we set this up and built this the way you wanted it. And they said, yes, that was the way we wanted it like 8 years ago. How we've done business has changed, and they need to now refresh everything, and we need to go back and help them do that. So I think it kind of needs to come from different parts of your organization.
Thank you for that, Sue. Now, I had my own follow-up question. I'm going to start with Corey on this one, and this is more about skill sets. What's key skill sets from IT hires are you looking for when you're out in the field, and what is really the background that you're trying to recruit currently? I know we talked about some of the other avenues on where you're getting people, through CyberCore or through internships and details within Sue's organization. When you're hiring people, what are the skill sets you're looking for?
So that will all depend on the hiring manager and the need of, it could be project-based, it could be the need of someone who has vacated a position rather quickly, whether it be another job or retirement. But I will say this, I try to sort of change the focus of looking at a resume that for a person that has moved positions several times. It used to be a way of looking at that as a person who was not going to sort of stay in your agency for a certain amount of time, because they would then not be interested in move on to another position. And it's just a different way of looking at that because of the skill sets that they have gained along with those positions. So those are the things that I have been trying to sort of work with managers on when they're looking at resumes, trying to get away from the fact that you went to a certain particular school, trying to get away from the fact that, oh, they don't have a certification in this. So those are sort of the roadblocks that we as HR professionals are having to deal with in our workforce, and trying to get a more diverse workforce so that it is a reflection, public service is a reflection of basically the globe in the United States, basically. So.
Thank you, Corey. Jacqueline, I wanted to follow up with you. Did you have any other things you looked at when you're making hiring decisions?
Sure. Great communicators, folks that can really connect with our business units, right? Someone that is really keen on listening and understanding the business, right? They're going to be their champion, right? Someone that can communicate requirements and the user's requirements and translate technology in a real world language, right? Most of our customers are attorneys, and they really don't want to hear that. They want to be able to understand the technology and how it's going to benefit them without all of the technical terms behind that, right? I think starting with relationship building is the best way for us to develop the partnership that you talked about. And people are the way that we do that. So it is great that folks have certifications and degrees, but really if you can't communicate and connect with the customer, you're really not doing service to the organization.
Thank you, Jackie. Sue, I had one follow-up question. It came from chat that I just saw. Is there any concern with the different the changes on what we're focusing on? Do you feel that changes, significance of certifications?
Changes in, certifications. I think we used to look at certain certifications, and I know Jacqueline will probably agree with me on that there were some top certifications you used to see all the time and require And when you looked at it, a cyber or IT security person, you looked for that. I think that's changed somewhat because there are new certifications being introduced every day for cloud, for assessment, for authorizations. And so it's definitely changed, but what we always say is get that certification that supports your skill set. Get that certification that supports what it is you want to do for that organization or for the private sector moving forward for the next several years. These are not inexpensive. These are expensive certifications. Your organization may be helping you pay for that, or you may be paying, but you are going to have to maintain that certification with trainings and the like. So if you're not a technical person, the CISSP may not be the certification that you need and want, even though we've all sit here and saying, well, that's the end all be all for a certification. You may be looking at, if I am an assessor, if I'm an auditor, if I am interested in authorization, if I'm interested in cloud, there are other certifications that may speak to that. I think the organizations providing those certifications are also looking at, because of the enormous amount of demand for workforce, they're coming out with new certifications every day. Another colleague and I just went through a training and are taking another one because we're going, okay, this is totally new. This might be helpful to us as we move into this area. So staying up to speed on what's out there. But it isn't just 2 or 3 anymore. And I know sometimes the traditionalists will say you have to have this. But I want to look at, does that really support what it is they're going to be doing for the organization? To get a certification and go through all of that, to not be able to utilize that, really doesn't help the organization at all.
So it sounds like there's really an emphasis in specialization more than anything.
Yep.
Okay. I think we have time for one final question. I want to pose this to Jackie. It's regarding IT resources and how they're provided within the government. So the individual that asked this question was indicating that private sector can get, they get equipment, day one of employment, whereas getting GFE can sometimes take days or weeks. How's your organization adapting to overcome that? Is there a way to expedite?
Well, I can't necessarily say that is a problem at the Federal Trade Commission. Our standard is day one when you enter, whether you are entering on site in the building or it's remotely, you have GFE. So if you may not have access to all the systems because it's may be determined after the fact, but our base budget includes the resource and equipment required for all of our staff. So we are accounting for. Let me step back. We are centrally managed, so we provide all of the IT services, whether it be access to an application, the licensing, the equipment, and so we are provisioning that as part of our base budget and account for that as part of the norm. So it is a standard that if employee starts day one, they have that equipment, or our customer satisfaction grades will absolutely tank if we don't necessarily set that standard.
I could see that happening. Not that I have seen that happening, but that could definitely be the response. So it sounds like as long as you can plan ahead is really what the goal would be at that point.
Correct.
Okay. I think we're almost out of time. Sue, if you had anything else you wanted to add to that topic, if not, I think we can close out. Thank you all for your time today. Appreciate it, and have a great session.